What's going on, everyone? So, Rob Pelinka and the Los Angeles Lakers remained extremely patient. The goal was to land Christian Wood. That was all the talk. That was all the conversation. That was what the Lakers were holding out and waiting for, right? You saw guys like JaVale McGee end up going here. You saw some of the young guys that were on the market go X, Y, and Z, right? And it was like, what are the Lakers going to do? They need a center, right? You look at the Lakers roster and it's like, man, this roster is ridiculous. The one major glaring hole is the center position. And yes, could the Lakers have used a more sizable center? Sure, right? But when you look at this Lakers roster and you look at Christian Wood, talent trumps everything, right? And your job, get the most talent that you can and have them figure it out, right? And Christian Wood should fit in seamlessly. Guy in his ability to stretch the floor. Also, he's had years where he was solid defensively. I know that that's a big concern. Still averaged like a block and a half last season. And he's not going to be the only guy having to defend, right? Like last year, Dallas was terrible defensively, even before the Kyrie trade. They were better, but they were still really bad, right? And now you have a guy in Christian Wood who is going to have Anthony Davis backing him up, who's going to have guys like Jared Vanderbilt and, Gabe Vincent and, even Max Christie. He looks like a great on-ball defensive guy. You'll have Austin Reeves, who's been a very good defensive player, especially in FIBA, right? Like, you start putting the pieces together. You look at the size and versatility that this roster has. Like, the Lakers are probably going to be number one defensively. And Christian Wood, I do believe if he can focus and buy in, can be a serviceable defensive guy. I'm not saying he has to be elite. I'm not saying he has to be, defensive player of the year type guy, but we just need him to be serviceable. Can he hold his own in a matchup? Yes, he's not the guy ideally you want to throw on a Jokic or whatever, but you're never stopping those guys, right? You're just trying to wear them down over a 7-game series. You're throwing, Christian Wood and Jackson Hayes and Rui Hachimura and LeBron James and Anthony Davis all at Jokic, right? That's how the Lakers beat Denver in 2020. They threw Dwight Howard and JaVale McGee and Anthony Davis at him game in and game out and wore him down. Now, he's not the same guy he was back in 2020, but still, it's the idea of just you get physical with them, you rough them up. He's only one person and you have several, right? And you just keep throwing bodies at him. And so I do think Christian Wood could help. But the Lakers still have the 15th roster spot. And personally, my guess is they don't fill that and they just wait until the buyout market and kind of piece and see what else do they need. And then maybe going into the playoffs, if need be, like if there isn't a player that becomes available that makes sense for them, or a trade doesn't come on the horizon that makes sense for them or whatever, right? Because, it's also possible that the Lakers end up making a trade, right? D'Angelo Russell, there's a lot of thoughts of him end up being the odd man out. That's one of the reasons that they didn't, that they convinced him to waive his no trade clause, so that way that they could eventually trade him. He's got a very tradable salary. He also has the option to opt out next season, so he could clear salary space for a team. Like, there's a lot of flexibility there for this team. The Lakers have plenty of depth, plenty of wings, plenty of size, plenty of everything to where even if you had to unload a guy or two, you'd be totally fine, right? So this offseason was a absolute success. And throughout the course of the season, it should be too. And I'm sure the Lakers will be monitoring and trying to find the best deal possible. And we've seen Rob Pelinka, right? Like, if he finds something that makes sense, that'll improve this roster, he'll absolutely go do it and take it. But again, what do the Lakers need still? Now, obviously, they could still use a sizable center. I think that's the easiest point to start, right? But the problem is minutes are already sparing, and any center that you bring in has to be okay with a majority of the time getting DNPs, right? Because Christian Wood is better at the 4 spot, but you look at the 4 spot and it's like, okay, well, you have Anthony Davis, you have LeBron James, you have Rui Hachimura, you have Jared Vanderbilt who could play the 4, you have Taurean Prince that could play the 4, you have Cam Reddish that could play the 4, right? Like, you look at this roster and it's like, okay, they have like 5 or 6 guys that could play the 4 spot. So it makes sense to have Christian Wood play the 5. right? Because you got to free up as many minutes as possible. So any center that you get, you're going to need them to be willing to accept and buy into whatever is asked of them. So you're looking at either a relatively young guy and like, say a Myers Leonard, right? He would just be happy with being on a roster. That would be just a solid move for him rather than him just not having a job, right? So it's like, okay, well, I could be in that position or I could be on the couch watching basketball, right? Rather get playing minutes sparingly and actually make a paycheck. Or you're looking at like a veteran guy, Dwight Howard, DeMarcus Cousins, somebody that would understand their role, that would be willing to, on some nights, have a DNP or, have a night where it's like, hey, tonight you're only going to play like 10 minutes, right? Tomorrow you're going to play 30 minutes. The next game you're going to play like 15 minutes and just be okay with that fluctuation and that lack of consistency in playing time. Again, having one of those veteran guys that are kind of out of the league, it's like, well, what is your other options? Yeah, you could go and continue to play overseas and stuff, and yeah, you get playing time and whatnot, or you come back to the NBA, be on an actual NBA roster, and compete for an NBA championship, because that's what this team is looking for, right? This Lakers team has zero excuses. They have all of the talent, all the depth, all the tools, everything you need to win an NBA championship. They have the 2 stars. The only thing really standing in their way, knock on wood, would be health, right? And even then, like, they have a lot of depth. Obviously, if you lose Anthony Davis or LeBron James, that changes things. But, they could lose a player or two and still be totally fine. And that is very valuable, right? And this Lakers roster should be healthy and should be fine because you don't have to play anybody 40 minutes a game, right? You're not going to be in that position where LeBron James has to play 38 minutes a game just for you guys to stay afloat. No, like LeBron James, like there's no reason LeBron should be playing more than 30 minutes a game, right? Now, obviously, if there's a game, it's tight. You're playing Boston, right? It's a tie game with like 3 minutes left and LeBron's at 30 minutes. You're not going to say, well, okay, we're just going to pull him. Like, no, you go try to win the game, finish the game, right? But for the most part, he should have his minutes down. AD should have its minutes down. Everyone should have their minutes down. Getting another center would help with that, especially Anthony Davis, probably going to miss 20 plus games. LeBron James, probably going to miss 20 plus games. So in those games, you can, you move Christian Wood to the 4 and then have like Jackson Hayes as the backup and then, or even start Jackson Hayes if you want, right? Like, especially if like LeBron and AD miss some games, which isn't out of the realm of possibility, right? You could go Hayes and Christian Wood and then now you'd have the need for a Myers Leonard or a DeMarcus Cousins or whatever. You could find minutes here and there for some of these guys. But the other sort of blatant absence, I guess, and it's not like a huge deal, but the Lakers could use another shooting guard, right? Like the 2 glaring holes on this roster is shooting guard and center. They just filled their center position. So it would make sense to go get a shooting guard that can make plays, shoot the shots, right? And just be a solid backup because that's what you need, right? And again, the Lakers aren't like desperate for a shooting guard, right? You have D'Angelo Russell and Austin Reeves who could both play the 2 guard. Gabe Vincent would be a little undersized, but if you needed to in a pinch, he could play the 2 guard. You have Taurean Prince, who's more than capable at 6'7", could slide over and play the 2 guard. He's played small forward. He's played power forward. The only difference in today's NBA with positionless basketball is nothing. It's just the position that you're playing, right? The Lakers could even go like a big route if they wanted to. And for like position's sake, have like LeBron at the 2, right? Have like Reeves or D'Lo at the point, LeBron at the 2, Vando at the 3, Rui or Wood at the 4, and then AD at the 5, right? Like I think a lineup like that could absolutely work. Shooting would be a little bit of a concern, but like if you had to in like just a small doses you needed to, you'd be fine. Cam Reddish could play the 2 guard, right? The Lakers aren't that desperate. The idea is Max Christie is the guy that's going to take those strides, that's going to take those leaps and be the backup 2 guard. We got the reports that the Lakers really want that to happen, but This is a Lakers team and a Lakers roster that, again, absolutely is trying to win an NBA championship, and they have the tools and the talent to do so. If you can get a veteran, reliable guy who's kind of been there, done that shooting guard, I think you do that, right? I get the idea and sentiment of like having Max Christie kind of play a bigger role and kind of step into that two guard. But if you can win an NBA championship, right, and Max Christie has to kind of ride the pine and play in the G League for another year, you do it, right? Like, he's young enough to where it's not going to make an impact. He's 20 years old. You could sit him in the G League for the next 3 years and he'd still only be 23. He'd still be young enough to be drafted in that year's draft, right? Like, it's not a big deal. Obviously, you want him to start taking some strides at some point and moving in the starting role, but it's about winning a chip this year. You have the team, you have the talent, you have the tools. Now, I'm not saying you just go get somebody just to get somebody and, now Max Christie's riding the pine. No, but if somebody becomes available through a buyout or via trade or whatever, and you can get him and it makes sense, then I think you make that move. The two spots that I think the Lakers could still use a body on is a sizable veteran center, because you already have your projects, right? You already have Jackson Hayes, Colin Castleton, right? You don't really necessarily need a third project center, right? You have Christian Wood, not a project. He can play fine. You got Anthony Davis. So you do have your two like stabilizers, but I would like that guy that we could throw at Jokic for like 10 minutes a game in the playoffs if we run into them. But even if we run into like the Pelicans and they have Valanciunas, or, the Grizzlies and they have Steven Adams, it'd be nice to have a big body that's not going to get bullied, right? To have a big body that's not going to get pushed around, that you could throw out there for 10 minutes and just really, handle business. And then also, the shooting guard position. I think those are the two positions that you look at and you go, yeah, Lakers could really use another two guard and another center. But again, neither of those are big needs. In my opinion, I look at everything. One, I absolutely and wholeheartedly trust Rob Pelinka. The guy has proven time and time again, he's him. This dude is the GOAT. Right? This guy is ridiculous. If he goes and leads another championship, that means he's won 2 championships in his first 5 years, 6 years as a GM or whatever it is. Like, dude, there's guys like Sam Presti, who many believe is the best GM in the league, hasn't even won one, right? Like, at some point you got to give Rob Pelinka his flowers. But regardless, I think Rob Pelinka continues to remain patient, waits for the buyout market. Obviously, if there's a guy there, if a guy gets bought out at the, before training camp and he just makes a world of sense, I imagine Rob Pelinka goes signs that guy. But more likely than not, they'll probably just leave it open and wait and be patient. And if you can get somebody on the buyout, that's great. If nothing pans out, then you just sign, you bring Colin Castleton or something like that up just for the playoffs, whatever, right? You figure it out. I'm not really that concerned with it. But also, I also think that there is the talent aspect of it, where if you can get somebody that is very talented and really good at the game of basketball and say they are usually a small forward, you go get that guy, right? You put as much talent on this roster as possible and trust that the talent will trump everything. You trust that them as NBA players can figure it out, right? Like, so, I don't know, throw out like a DeMar DeRozan or something like that, right? Like, let's say he gets bought out, right? Again, just using as an example, but let's say he gets bought out, right? It's like, you got to go get him, right? And you figure it out. Could you use a center more? Sure, but it's like, you add DeMar to this team, it's just, now it's just like, stop, right? Like, if you don't win an NBA championship, something's wrong, right? Like, it's ridiculous. So, time will tell. We'll see what happens, but I definitely think shooting guard and another center are the two positions that the Lakers should definitely be looking at. And in the veteran sense, right? I'd prefer the veteran kind of get some more stability. You got plenty of youth on this roster. It'd be nice to kind of have like that Jared Dudley guy, but a guy that can actually play. That would be solid. But anyway, again, love your thoughts, opinions, however you feel. This is a discussion, so I want to know. Let me know down in the comments.